One receiver that I don't like sticking in that same game this week is Christian Kirk. And it's nothing against him. It's everything to do with Doug Peterson and how his offense runs. Kirk is still a really good player. The separation metrics still look fantastic on him. However, his role has just not been where we needed to be in this offense. The targets have just been all over the place. It's twofold, really. Brian Thomas is an absolute baller. Boy, were we all over that one last week. And the second part of that is this is kind of another Brian Thomas week. Chicago is a really good secondary. I do not want to take anything from Jalen Johnson, who's balling out right now. But in terms of just coverage shell schematic matchup, this matchup definitely favors Thomas. Bears play a ton of cover 3, nearly 38% of the time. And Kirk has just earned 10% of the targets and has 3 receptions on 46 routes this season against cover 3. Evan Ingram should be back. Brian Thomas is continuing to emerge. I'm benching Christian Kirk this week.
What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
Yo, what is going on? And welcome to week 6. It is a messy week 6. We have 4 good teams out on a bye that we've all been relying on heavily in our lineups. And we also have another slew of injuries to deal with, to go through. However, scoring is back. It's been good to see, offense is starting to gel. Quarterbacks starting to get in rhythm. Offensive line starting to get in rhythm. Scoring has picked up over the last couple weeks. So it's good to have some higher fantasy scores back in our lineups. What's going on, everybody? I am Graham Barfield, one of the co-owners here at Fantasy Points. Welcome back to the channel. Thanks for hanging out again this week. Couple of housekeeping notes. As always, make sure you are using the site's projections for all of your start-sit needs every single week. We literally spend, if you guys knew, the amount of hours that Chris spends, Chris Wecht, our projections are, and then the rest of the team spends just kind of combing through things, combing through notes, stats, news. That is basically the one-stop shop. Basically, just go through our flex rankings as you're setting your lineups. Use those as gospel. I use them every single week, and I also use them to write my weekly start-sit column that is free on the site. That has all of my fun weekly matchup stats and just, trends and fantasy notes that I'm tracking, news that I'm tracking. That's important for the week. That column is updated every single day. Get it up on Thursdays. And updated till Sunday. Let's get to it, though. As always, we start at quarterbacks here on this video. And I could not talk about Kirk Cousins. I mean, come on, he just threw for 500 yards. Kirk Cochains just went off on Thursday Night Football, and I'm really kicking myself for this one. This is truly not hindsight. It's kind of bad process. I liked that game a lot to go off. I liked Baker Mayfield in that game. I didn't notice it, but Atlanta had really upped their pass rate over expectation in the prior week. Back in week 4, they had a 12% pass rate over expectation. Cousins threw, I think, 34, 36 times. It was a season high at that point. And that was kind of a bull signal, right? That okay, Kirk's kind of got his, feet back under him. Obviously, no one could have expected the 500 yards. Cousins has been basically like a middling QB2 to start this season. I think everybody kind of expected a slow start coming off his injury. I think obviously between the pass rate significantly increasing and now back-to-back games, they've been at plus 12% in terms of pass rate over expectation in back-to-back games. Between that and this matchup, it's just kind of a slam dunk, windmill dunk type play with Cousins. I just think just anecdotally watching him, I don't think the arm strength is all the way back. They're not pushing the ball downfield too much, but this kind of reminds me of end of career Peyton Manning, where he just had answers for the defense and knew where to get the ball out in terms of timing and rhythm, even though his arm talent was a little bit zapped. This week, Panthers secondary, man. I mean, what can you say about this defense? They've just been cleaned out by injuries. Lost a couple key leaders early in the season. Yeah, they've just given up a league high 0.55 passing fantasy points per dropback. Obviously, that game has super high shootout appeal. Dalton really struggled in a tough matchup last week against the Bears. I think it's a better bounce back spot for him against the Falcons, especially after seeing what Baker just did to that defense last week. My favorite quarterback streamer of this week, and it's a little sketchy. I'm not gonna lie, because the start for Caleb Williams was obviously pretty bad. I mean, the off target throw rate was not great. It's picked up a little bit. The last 2 weeks, I was looking at some of our charting data here at FantasyPoints.com. In the last 2 weeks, Caleb Williams' catchable target rate has jumped up into the low 70s. That's still by no means like great, but it is closer to league average. He's starting to see it a little bit better. Obviously, the concern with him is just, he holds the ball for so long. Jags do have a really good front seven, but man, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether coverage they run. It doesn't matter if they're running man or zone. They're going to get shredded. Our guy Steve O'Rourke popped in the Discord this week and was saying that the Jags have kind of changed up their scheme, and I kind of pulled the numbers, and he was right. Obviously, the Jags started with a ton of man coverage in weeks 1 through 3. They're running it nearly 70% of the time in weeks 1 through 3. Last 2 weeks they've switched to more zone. Guys, it hasn't mattered. I mean, CJ Stroud just killed him for 345 yards. Joe Flacco, the man, Joe Flacco, 39-year-old, out there just shredding him, 359, 3 touchdowns. Stroud ripped him. Flacco ripped him. I don't think Caleb Williams is going to go out there and throw for like 340. That'd be very bullish. But this is just such a good matchup. I mean, yeah, those games in London are weird. Yeah, the Jags might lay an egg. The Bears defense could absolutely put the clamps on Jacksonville in the spot. I'm just playing the matchups here. The Jags have given up a top 12 scoring quarterback in 5 straight games to open the season. I think Caleb, maybe on the lower end, I think Caleb makes it 6 straight. All right, let's keep it moving over to running back. This is definitely a thinner week at running back with all the teams out on bye. Plus just some scattered kind of injury things that we're kind of tracking. I'll talk about a few of those situations just momentarily at the end of the running back section here. But yeah, no Chiefs, no Rams, no Dolphins, no Vikings. So it definitely cleans out kind of the middle tier of the running back pool. This week, I think there's just some obvious must starts at the top. Saquon Barkley's the RB1 in fantasy, I think, for the rest of the season. Then Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, obviously, Bijan Robinson, even though it's been a slow start for him, it's such a good spot for him against Carolina. Falcons, huge favorites. Brees is a lot trickier, but you got to keep him in lineups. I think Ken Walker and Jordan Mason in the Thursday night game obviously are must plays. Both lines back must plays. I think Chuba Hubbard's borderline must play once again. And yeah, Lions backs. Let's go through the RB2 pile, though, as we always do. And I don't want a single question on the Sunday show with myself, Tom Browley, and John Hansen when we go through all of your questions in the start sit chat. We answer them, every single one of them live. I don't want a single one about J.K. Dobbins this week. Obviously, absolutely dominated in 2 easy matchups in weeks 1 and 2. Just crushed the Raiders and Panthers. A little bit slower in 2 losses against the Steelers and Chiefs with just 76 yards on 29 carries. However, I'm very bullish here. He's coming out of a bye. Before the bye in his last game in week 4, Dobbins set a season high in snaps at 71%. He's playing on most passing downs. The Chargers are the most run-heavy offense in the league. Their pass rate under expectation is like nearly 8-9% under expectation. Yeah, man. I mean, Dobbins not only being the lead horse of this very run-heavy offense is fantastic for him, but he's also, when they do throw, he's also getting like the majority of the passing down routes, which is just massive. Just getting a couple dump offs or having the chance at a couple dump offs every single week is fantastic. Joe Alt is questionable. Their stud rookie tackle, but he has a chance at returning this week after missing their last game. Yeah, I add it all up. I think Dobbins is one of the best RB2 plays on this slate. Low scoring game, but probably going to be a very close game with Chargers and Broncos. All right, we'll keep it moving. I gotta take the L on this one. Rico Dowdle was one of my boys in best ball this year. I loved him. I kind of highlighted him in my tiers article. I was like, hey, this might be an interesting late round pick. He's going undrafted on Yahoo. It's worked for Rico. It did not work for me last week. I had him listed as like a semi-sit. Like I listed him as a flex play in my article, but I kind of said I was a little afraid because of the matchup. Yeah, should not have been. Dowdle played a season-high 51% of the snaps, paid it off with 114 scrimmage yards, scored the touchdown, obviously. The biggest thing here that I was concerned about is like I was pretty sure that Rico was going to get the early down stuff. I was pretty sure that he was probably going to get the passing down work too. I didn't know about the goal line and red zone stuff. Last 3 weeks, we've kind of gotten a bigger sample size. Dowdle has out-snapped Ezekiel Elliott by a 12-4 margin inside the 20. Huge for Dowdle's touchdown expectation, obviously. Just being attached to Dak, who's playing well. Cowboys offense still moving the ball pretty well, even though maybe not as well as last season. Yeah, overall, Dowdle is shaping up to be one of the best values in drafts. He's a really good RB2, I think, for the rest of the season. That sound you hear is the Zero RB bros throwing a massive dance party for all their 12th and 13th round Rico shares. But in all seriousness, this is a tough matchup. Detroit is obviously just stonewalling run games again, 58.3 yards allowed per game. That's fourth fewest, but the involvements just continue to tick up. Zeke's roles continue to tick down. I think at this point, man, you just keep rolling Dowdle as like an RB2 flex in every single week. And it really just kind of comes down to if they give him a goal line carry. One final RB2 that I'm in love with this week, and I think everybody's going to be in love with, is Chase Brown. Zach Moss has a minor foot injury. NFL Network's Mike Garofalo was saying that, listen, this isn't a long-term injury, but he might miss this week. Didn't practice on Wednesday, probably going to be a little bit limited. Even if he is limited, Moss, that is, it kind of seems like the takeover is like right on the corner. We kind of identified it with Rico a few weeks ago, and I was saying Rico's, finally starting to out-snap Zeke. I don't think this is that type of situation where, for two things, Moss is just a good veteran that they can trust in any situation. And I continue to say Brown needs to pick it up in pass protection. That's one of the big things, one of the big reasons why Moss continues to play over Brown. But over the last 2 weeks, Brown has 3 more carries, 27-24. I mean, literally anybody with eyes can continue to see that Brown is more explosive than Moss. The XFP, expected fantasy points numbers, are starting to look pretty good for Chase. 15 PPR expected fantasy points per game of the last 2 weeks compared to Moss at 13.7. Listen, if that sticks for the rest of the year and we get this kind of split backfield and we can use both as flex RB2 guys for the rest of this year, you're absolutely thrilled with that run out where you drafted them, right? Like you probably drafted Chase Brown in the 9th round or Zach Moss in like the 9th, 10th, or 11th. He kind of started to slip. At the end of the day, Chase Brown still has the most upside here. Bengals big favorites against a Giants run defense that is struggling a little. Yeah, I don't think Chase Brown's like must play this week, but he is a really, really strong RB2. All right, we'll sort through the bottom of the RB2 pile. It kind of seems like Jerome Ford's shaping up to be one of those roster cloggers like Zamir White. Ford is running behind a bad offensive line. His quarterback has lost his talent. Yeah, it's not looking good. I have no idea if Nick Chubb's going to play this week. He did return to a limited practice last week. There's been no information about whether or not he's going to play this week, and we probably won't hear that until late in the week. Deontay Foreman did mix in last week for 9 carries. He's questionable with a knee injury. Cleveland, man, at this point, they've just continued to trend down. I mean, this offense is implied for just 16.8 points per game. Points this week, that is, excuse me. It's tied with Vegas for the 3rd lowest implied total on the slate. Man, it's ugly. Scary hours for Brown, scary hours for Jerome Ford. 2 quick notes, a couple of running back injury notes that we're tracking here. Obviously, Joe Mixon this week. If Joe Mixon's back, I thought he might be back last week. If he's back this week, you're just putting him back in lineups as an RB2. It is, a little bit of a high injury risk for sure, but the Texans have slow played this injury, and I got to think if he's close, even like 90 to 95%, we're going to see Mixon in like a quasi bell cow role. Brian Robinson only played 37% of the snaps last week. Was really banged up coming into the game. He had a knee injury. He hasn't practiced to start this week. Rhamondre Stevenson ripped off the long gain last week, but he has a foot injury. Just something to note there as Drake May makes his first start. I do think Patriots run game might have a little bit more of a chance with May back there. Just one more thing for defenses to kind of have to key on with May's legs. All that being said, Stevenson's a little banged up too. Let's keep it moving over to receiver. I thought Tank Dell was already like a pretty good buy low. You could probably still get him a little lower than maybe he should be going. Nico Collins, man, just another brutal injury to this receiver landscape. Going to miss the next 4 weeks with a hamstring injury. Dell has already like I said, looked like a buy low. Based on his expected fantasy value, he is underperformed by nearly 3 fantasy points per game. Meanwhile, Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs have both overperformed by 2.5 fantasy points for Diggs and nearly 4 fantasy points for Collins over expectation compared to the role. And that's two things. Obviously, Nico Collins is maybe the best receiver in the NFL. CJ Stroud's connection with him is probably top in the NFL. Stephon Diggs is still playing really well. Tank Dell is too. Like, it's just kind of been unlucky. They missed on a long throw. I want to say it was week 2 where Dell was streaking over the middle and Stroud just missed him. The separation metrics for Dell still look really good. He had the best ass last season by average separation score. And while he's not like dominating like Nico Collins, Tank Dell's average separation rate when lined up out wide is 15th best at 0.18. That barely trails Diggs at 0.19. Nico Collins is top 8. But I mean, the separation metrics look really good. The opportunity is here. I think Dell is, if you've been sitting on him in a few spots, as kind of a bench wide receiver 3 over the last couple of weeks, like this is the week to trot him out as a 2. I think the targets are going to find him, and they're going to find him quickly. Another player who is finding a lot of targets over the last 2 games before their bye is McConkey. Wasn't expecting to come on the week 6 show and hype up 2 Chargers, especially a receiver, but I think Lad's a pretty interesting buy candidate right now. We always see rookies tend to become more efficient, become more involved, just kind of in general break out late in their rookie seasons. This is kind of the point, middle of the October, those players really start to trend up. And McConkey seems like one of those players. Again, it's all under the context that Justin Herbert is currently averaging a career low by far, by the way, in pass attempts per game. It is absolutely wild. 22.8 pass attempts per game for Herbert. We are a long ways away from those 38 to 40 attempt games a couple of years ago. All of that being said, McConkey's share of this offense looks really strong. He led the Chargers in routes and targets by a wide margin over Quentin Johnston in their last 2 games before the bye. Got a whopping 39% of the first read targets. Woo, that'll keep him busy. The volume in this offense is just never going to be great. Like I keep saying, I don't see McConkey ever being like a 9, 10, 11 target player. However, looks really good. Roll's kind of trending up. He's going to avoid shadow coverage from Pat Surtain this week, who I expect to be on Quentin Johnston. Yeah, add it all up, I think McConkey's a pretty good wide receiver 3 in PPR. A couple more good wide receiver 3s that certainly haven't been at all this season. Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze. Listen, we're just chasing this matchup, man. I mean, like, if you have either of these guys, you know what it's been. I mean, in their 3 games with DJ Moore, Allen has 29 yards, 19, and 33. Odunze has a couple 1-catch games mixed in there. This passing offense has not been dynamic enough. It's not just Caleb Williams struggling. It's Shane Waldron struggling to kind of scheme things up for these guys. It's just been inconsistent. However, this matchup just rises all tides. Odunze has more upside because the Jags are so bad on the perimeter. They're giving up nearly 160 yards per game to perimeter receivers. Odunze has a lot of upside. Keenan has gotten more first reads, 26% of the first reads to Odunze at 17% in their 3 games together. I'm just going to play both where I have them as a wide receiver 3. Chase this matchup. We like Caleb Williams a lot in this spot. That game definitely has some sneaky shootout appeal. One receiver that I don't like sticking in that same game this week is Christian Kirk. And it's nothing against him. It's everything to do with Doug Peterson and how his offense runs. Kirk is still a really good player. The separation metrics still look fantastic on him. However, his role has just not been where we needed to be in this offense. Targets have just been all over the place. It's twofold, really. Brian Thomas is an absolute baller. Boy, were we all over that one last week. And the second part of that is this is kind of another Brian Thomas week. Chicago is a really good secondary. I do not want to take anything from Jalen Johnson, who is balling out right now. But in terms of just coverage shell schematic matchup, this matchup definitely favors Thomas. Bears play a ton of cover 3, nearly 38% of the time. And Kirk has just earned 10% of the targets and has 3 receptions on 46 routes this season against cover 3. Evan Ingram should be back. Brian Thomas is continuing to emerge. I'm benching Christian Kirk this week. One other receiver I'm benching that you probably picked up off the waiver wire and have been thrilled to just throw in your wide receiver 3 or flex spot this year is Alan Lazard. He just kept scoring touchdowns. However, the yardage has been significantly lower over the last couple weeks. 24 targets, 150 yards. He's gotten there with touchdowns, and he'll need a touchdown here because Buffalo is allowing the second fewest yards per game at 60.6 to opposing outside wide receivers. They just play so much too high. They do not give up anything on the outside. Lazard has 8 and 9 targets in his last couple games, but he really needs a touchdown here to get there. All right, let's move it on over to tight end, and it is a little better this week. I will say we don't have Kelsey. Yeah, sure, we don't have Kelsey, but I think the top is getting healthier and a little stronger. Right now, I see 6 must plays. I think you really should include maybe 8. Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, George Kittle, Jake Ferguson, Tucker Kraft, baby. Tucker Kraft's already a must play. A 78% route share for Kraft over the last 2 weeks. I would also include Sam Laporta, Kyle Pitts, and Dalton Kincaid in that kind of you drafted those dudes. Do you really have a better streaming option? Tight bucket. Real quick on Kincaid, man. Led the team in routes last week, led them in targets. It was an absolute nightmare performance from Josh Allen. I do think the bigger games are coming from Kincaid, that the peripheral, under the hood usage from him has remained strong. Khalil Shakir's questionable again this week. That's a late Monday night game, but man, I know it's been ugly with Kincaid. Keep sticking it out with him. 2 tight ends I like a little bit more than normal this week. One, Dalton Schultz. We just talked a little bit about Tank Dell and just kind of how the opportunity is, it's there for these receivers now. Collins was, accounting for 40% of the yardage market share for the Texans. Again, he's a player you just don't replace. Their offense is going to be less efficient with him on the field. I don't want you guys to have any inkling I'm saying you just replace him with Tank Dell and you're good, or you don't replace Nico Collins with Dalton Schultz and you're good. It just opens up the opportunity in this offense. And last week, Schultz saw a season high 6 targets, season high 17% of the first reads last week. Those figures right there, 6 targets and 17% of the first reads, that's good enough for a low end tight end 1 right there. He's attached to CJ Stroud. Patriots are allowing the 8th most receiving yards per game to tight ends at 54. Listen, he's a really good streamer this week if you need a bye week replacement. And honestly, I've been picking up Schultz where I found him on a few waiver wires. He's 40% available, I think, on Yahoo. Just trying to stash some bankable equity in this passing offense for the Texans in shallower leagues. One other tight end, we like Tyler Conklin last week as a streamer, mentioned him in my article. You can go back to him again. Listen, you can hear in the tone of my voice, I'm not excited about it. You're never excited to play Tyler Conklin. He's earned 6, 8, and 9 targets over the last 3 weeks. I do think the Jets become more run heavy under Todd Downing. Nathaniel Hackett and Rodgers over the last 3 weeks, Jets have quietly turned into a top 5, top 6 pass offense in terms of pass rate over expectation. I do expect them to come more balanced with Brees and Braylon Hall back there. All that being said, they got to block it up better. They can talk about how they want to run the ball better all they want. Brees Hall is dead last in yards before contact. So unless that changes, the Jets might have to just keep throwing. It is a good matchup this week for the run game. I think they're going to have to keep throwing. And in terms of just coverage shell, in theory, this is a good matchup for Conklin. Bills play a ton of too high safety coverage like we've been saying all year. And Conklin's targets per route run nearly doubles when facing too high coverages this year. 0.2 targets per route run compared to 0.11 when facing 1 high coverage. Guys, thanks so much for hanging out. That's going to do it for me. Good luck in week 6. I hope that you have a clean sweep in all of your leagues. If you could please like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Make sure you got the notifications on so you don't miss any of our awesome videos, live streams. We're pumping out the content daily here at Fantasy Points. And until next week, I'll see you guys at the top of the leaderboard.